In the last years, I've played with multiple small form factor PC cases only to settle with the Cemo A4. It was one of the first ITX cases of its size to still allow a full-size GPU, and many other similar designs have followed after this one. However, most of these are fairly expensive, so today we'll take a look at a more affordable option, the Cemo A4. While it's definitely bigger than the Cemo A4, it does share some of its characteristics, so I thought it'd be nice to check it out. So let's do that. The case comes in a brown box, and it's decently protected by closed cell foam pads. In terms of accessories, you get the mounting hardware and a sticky mesh for the fan grille. If we compare it against the Dan case, it's much bigger. While the Cemo finds some of its inspiration in the Dan case, it definitely has a few differences. So to build in that case, I removed all the parts I had in the Dan case. It's fairly simple, but the harder part is actually disconnecting the power supply cables. These fit snug, and there's not that much room for my fingers either. In the end, they come out as three main parts: the GPU, the motherboard, and the power supply. One thing to note is that the Cemo case requires a PCI extender if you want to install the GPU in there, and it's not included in the box. These can be quite pricey, so that's something to consider in the total price of the case. To keep things simple, I simply reused the one that came with my Dan case, and it was the proper length. So starting with the GPU, it was quite straightforward, securing it with two screws at the back. Then with the power supply, things got a bit more complicated. This case is meant for a full-size ATX power supply, while the Dan case only accepts SFX units. So I only had an SFX power supply available and no adapter bracket. Fortunately, two of the screws fit, but I would say it's far from ideal. If I were to use this case long term, I would invest in the proper bracket or go with an ATX power supply. Then the motherboard. Again, quite straightforward. My tiny Noctua CPU cooler was not an issue in that case, and in fact, it should accept coolers up to 70mm in height, so not too bad. So I had to reconnect all cables, both for my power supply but also for the case. It has a front USB 3.0 port, and the power button is also located at the front, and you also need to connect the power extension to the power supply. As for the mesh, it has two sticky pads on both sides, so you can install it on top. It seems to hold on fine. Then I installed two fans I had laying around, and I had to pierce holes in that mesh so that I could screw my fans in. Overall, it feels a bit DIY, and you cannot remove that dust filter easily to clean it once it's dirty, so not ideal, but it works and doesn't look too bad. And then it was time to reinstall those tempered glass panels. It doesn't look too bad, honestly. I have to say, in fact, it looks pretty good for the price you pay. The whole thing is made from aluminum alloy and glass. You get a vertically mounted GPU, and I like the sharp edges as well. I think it looks modern. The quality is not as great as my Dan case, but the price difference is huge, so it's understandable. One thing to note is that cable management is not great with this case. Both panels are completely clear with no channels or something like that to hide cables, so it's almost impossible to have it looking perfectly clean. I didn't waste too much time on mine, mainly because I thought it wouldn't look that great anyway. Another important thing to note is that this case gets pretty warm. Those glass panels don't let any air in, and the only air intakes are those small square cutouts at the bottom and back of the case. But they're fairly small considering the amount of power you can have in there. I actually tried an MSI Ventus 2070 Super in there, and it reached over 85 degrees quite fast by only playing Fortnite. So yeah, not that great. Although this card doesn't have a great cooler, and that's why you can see that I replaced it with an EVGA XC instead. To give you an idea, I ran AIDA64 for a little over 10 minutes in both the Cemo case and the Dan case, and my i5 8600's max temperature was 76 degrees in the Dan case and 72 in the Cemo. Then running FurMark for the same time in both cases, my 2070 maxed out at 71 degrees Celsius in the Dan case, while it went up to 75 degrees in the Cemo. So overall, thermals are quite similar, but keep in mind that the Dan case has no case fans and its volume is a lot smaller, while the Cemo had two 120mm fans with a much bigger case. If I was to build a PC around this case, instead of just fitting my parts in there, I'd get an ATX power supply so that it fits correctly with the mounting section. Then I would probably get a 240mm AIO cooler for the CPU, mounting it on top and making sure to set it as an exhaust. That way the CPU wouldn't generate heat inside the case, and both fans would help to cool down the GPU. I'm currently running a 65-watt 6-core i5 CPU, and I wouldn't go for a more power-hungry CPU. And I would try to get a GPU with a large cooler, like the Gigabyte WindForce line. The case should fit GPUs that are slightly wider than 2 slots, like most of the new cards are. However, I would try to keep it 2 units wide, as I fear it would come too close to the side panel and restricts airflow. So would I recommend this case? If you really like the design and don't mind managing the heat, either by choosing energy efficient components or by having proper cooling solutions, then I think it's great. Keep in mind, you'll have to buy a PCI extender separately. It looks nice and definitely has a wow factor that other cases in the same price range don't necessarily have. The materials are premium and it has an overall good build quality, which makes it stand out in today's market. And maybe that's what it is. I saw someone else making custom panels for this case, and that's a great idea, making it even more personal and potentially helping with thermals. So this is it. Is this a case you would get for yourself? For me personally, I will go back to the Dan Case A4 for its form factor, but I really don't hate it either and would consider keeping it if I didn't already have the Dan Case. As always, I'll have an affiliate link down below for you to check it out, so feel free to use it and help the channel at the same time. So thank you for watching, make sure you leave a like if you did, and if you didn't, just let me know why in the comments below. Otherwise, don't forget to subscribe if you still haven't already, as I'll see you in the next video.